Good morning, everyone, and welcome into Wake and Take. It's your boy Jason, and we've got some football to talk about today. Today, we're going to be talking about a couple news stories that happened yesterday, kind of a slow news day. But then we're going to take a dive into some of the top unsigned free agents that are still available, still looking for a team. This is for you sickos out there looking for some players to maybe pick up or get throw-ins and trades. You know, it's that time of year. We're chilling. We're talking some football. It's going to be good. So go ahead, take out your coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All right, everyone. Welcome in. Welcome in. Glad to see you all in the chat on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, wherever you're watching, listening on the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to Wake and Take. I mentioned I have two news stories for you guys. So let's fire through those before we get into some free agency talk. The first one is D'Onta Foreman. D'Onta Foreman is signing with the Browns. And my first thoughts with this were, okay, it doesn't really matter. And that's probably how it goes, right? But the thing with D'Onta Foreman is this guy has just only produced when asked. No matter what happens, especially the last two seasons, D'Onta Foreman sees the field and he produces and plays well. He's averaging, 10 points a game when he's getting like a true snap share, at least getting up there to the 15, 20 pointers sometimes, depending on his touchdown dependency and all of that. Just literally a consistent producer when given a good snap share. But that's, if given a good snap share. And the thing with D'Onta Foreman is he keeps signing these like third string running back contracts and then ending up being the starter, which both makes me concerned and feel good about Nick Chubb / Jerome Ford. As you guys know, I think Nick Chubb will bounce back fine. I think Jerome Ford will still have a piece too. And I think that signing D'Onta Foreman kind of lends some credence to that. That means that the Browns, don't want to bring into true competition for Jerome Ford or Nick Chubb, but still have an option with a similar type of running back to those two. Just grind them out between the tackles type running back. If anything were to happen to the two. But seeing this signing has to make you feel a little bit better about starting Nick Chubb or Jerome Ford next season, just because that means that the Browns probably feel good about them too. If they were a little concerned about Nick Chubb's knee, I think they would have been out there signing one of the flashier free agents for sure, instead of just getting D'Onta Foreman. On the flip side, though, D'Onta Foreman, I feel like, is some sort of voodoo, black magic, witch doctor type guy because, as mentioned, over the last two seasons, despite being a third or fourth string running back, has still seen starting running back opportunities for multiple weeks. And that's what kind of makes me concerned. Is like, does he have like some sort of luck gene or something where things just fall his way so he can start? I don't know. But it is a little concerning when you look at it that way, just because like, I don't understand how D'Onta Foreman always ends up starting every single season. I don't get it. I hope it doesn't happen, but that just seems to be what happens with this guy. I don't know if he just had like a Christian McCaffrey voodoo doll to get him traded and then had like a Khalil Herbert and Roschon Johnson voodoo doll in his locker. I don't know how that happened. I really don't, but somehow the cards always fall in D'Onta Foreman's way. So I'm concerned in that regard. But the actual true fantasy football lens, I think the actual true analysis to take away here is that the Browns feel good about Nick Chubb and Jerome Ford, or else they would have brought in a much better running back to compete against them. And I would also probably venture that this means the Browns will not be addressing running back in the draft. I think that they have a solid room right now. If they do, it would be just someone at the end as a body, but I don't think any true competition is being added to this backfield. So I think you can still keep holding on to Jerome Ford and Nick Chubb pretty well. I will say in that regard, while I'm there, now's the time to buy Nick Chubb. Buy Nick Chubb right now, and then maybe flip him when the hype videos start coming out. And also in that regard, maybe sell Jerome Ford right now or just keep holding on to Jerome Ford, but definitely buy Jerome Ford when the Nick Chubb hype starts coming out as well. I think both of those running backs are going to feed next year. Jerome Ford is a very efficient running back. So is Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb's going to get the lion's share, but I do think that both of those running backs are going to get a ton of volume. We've seen the Cleveland Browns depend on the running back position year in, year out now with Stefanski. Both Nick Chubb and Ford are going to be good, and I just think that there's a way to time the market right now, ladies and gentlemen, by buying Nick Chubb, because there's no hype videos out right now, but he's going to be fine. And then once those hype videos come out and everyone's back in on the Nick Chubb train, then you can go buy Jerome Ford. And then you have a backfield for fantasy football, a budget backfield, but a good one. And that's what it's all about. That's how you win your leagues. That's how you get ahead. So I hope that was some good advice. And then, maybe just go ahead and get some Deontay Foreman. So yeah. Just get all three, right? As a Browns fan and Roshan Truther, I hate Foreman. It's true. Big Time Timogen said he feels the Browns cut Chubb. This is possible. This is something we talked about on the cut candidates episode. They could free up like a decent bit of money by cutting Nick Chubb, but I'm not so sure. I don't know. Granted, I'm just going to say I don't know, but I'm just not so sure. I think that the Browns like Nick Chubb enough to keep him around, and I think they need him enough. And I think if they were to cut him, we probably would have heard a little bit of rumblings by now that they're ready to move on from him. But, sometimes these people move in silence. So we'll see. Like I said, it does free up some money, but I think it's going to be Nick Chubb, Jerome Ford, Deontay Foreman next year. So that's the Browns' new backfield. Let's go and move on to just a quick little update on the Marvin Harrison Jr. subject. Yesterday, as we know, was the Ohio State Pro Day, and we know he sat out. Some news has come out about why he sat out, and that is that he actually spoke to a few teams at the Combine, and all of them told him he doesn't need to test at his Pro Day at the Combine, so he just did it. Namely, the source came out and said that the Cardinals specifically told him that he doesn't have to work out at his Pro Day, and so he didn't. But also it has come out that he spoke to 9 different teams, one of them being the Cardinals, and all 9 of those teams told him that they do not need to see him work out at the Pro Day. This just basically brings home the point when we talked about this yesterday. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a lock to be the first wide receiver taken. He's a lock to be the first wide receiver taken in our fantasy football drafts, and he's still a stud. He's still the best wide receiver in this class, and we need to stop overthinking it just because we aren't seeing his testing numbers. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a stud. Don't overthink it. It's getting ridiculous. Get Marvin Harrison Jr. Literally just stop overthinking it. I'm going to say it again. Get Marvin Harrison Jr. and stop overthinking it. It's easy. It's easy. We don't need to see numbers on a piece of paper to know that he's a good athlete. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a stud. Don't overthink it. Cool. That is genuinely, that was all the news I have for you guys. There were some funny stories out there in the world, but nothing actually too important. Saquon Barkley's daughter, when he signed to the Eagles, asked Saquon, does that mean we get to win now? So I think that's hilarious. And sorry to you Giants fans that had to endure that. But otherwise, there's genuinely no news out there from yesterday, which lets us kind of take a look into some of these unsigned free agents that are still kind of hanging around, waiting to find a team, waiting to get a team to take a chance on them. And, this is ugly. I understand this isn't the prettiest list of players, but I also understand that a lot of you play in some deep leagues, maybe still rostering some of these people, holding on to some hope, maybe still like a few of these players and just curious where they could end up. I've got some top ones. There's still some that I'm not going to discuss, and there's some that I'm just going to fire through that there's really not much to mention. We'll start, and there's really no particular order here. I just kind of, off the top of my head, put down the ones that I remembered. So no particular order. Some are better than where I start. I'm not going best to worst or whatever. But either way, here we go. We'll start with Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd is 29 years old. Of course, been a very consistent producer for the Cincinnati Bengals. Now looking like he will be is a free agent. Not looking like he'll be a free agent, is a free agent. His contract has expired with the Cincinnati Bengals. And you've got to think a player like Tyler Boyd is a hot commodity in the wide receiver market, at least to some needy teams. Like, I know he's not going to command a ton of money, but he's just been a very reliable player his entire career. He's had 2,000-yard seasons. He consistently shows up for big plays, whether it be third down conversions, touchdowns, just anything really. Tyler Boyd has just been a reliable target for the Cincinnati Bengals his entire career, and he'll be a very reliable target wherever he goes. I hope and kind of think at this point he's going to end up back in Cincinnati off some sort of team-friendly contract. But there are some other teams out there that are in the works from a quick Google search. The Steelers, the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Cardinals, and the Ravens are all reportedly in the mix for Tyler Boyd. And I think all of those makes a ton of sense. We'll start with the Steelers. The Steelers, of course, just moved on from Deontay Johnson and have a little bit of fun money to play with now. I think that that's actually probably the most likely out of these, kind of staying in the AFC North, but then going to a team that could utilize him a little bit and he could play a decent role. I mean, probably literally replace what Deontay Johnson was doing for that team. So I like that landing spot a lot. I don't think it would be great for fantasy, but I do think it'd be pretty solid for real football and really help Justin Fields when he's starting next year. The next one is, of course, the Chiefs. I mean, this is one he's been tied to forever. They struggle in their slot receiver room. I mean, it has a bunch of people they keep taking shots on. Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, Richie James for some reason. The next one could be Tyler Boyd, maybe. They have some money. They could still use a wide receiver after signing Marquise Brown. They could sign Tyler Boyd and still draft someone. But either way, I think Tyler Boyd fits this team and would do really well there for sure. I think he would do well anywhere. The next team would be the Chargers. And of course, this is because they've moved on from all of their wide receivers. Essentially, they need some help in the room. And even though they're probably drafting one at the top of the draft, they should still bring in an older guy from free agency. And I think Tyler Boyd would be a really good option for Justin Herbert. That's perhaps my favorite out of these. Just because I think that he would be fed in this offense. He's better than Quentin Johnston, better than Josh Palmer. And I think he'd be a really good safety net for Justin Herbert on a team that I think will pass the ball to a player like Tyler Boyd a lot more than you would think, because this is a short yardage kind of move the ball methodically down the field type of offense now. And I think Tyler Boyd would excel in that type of system. And I think Jim Harbaugh would really, really like a Tyler Boyd type receiver. The Cardinals is another option, and this is also as they've moved on from Marquise Brown and need some wide receiver help, and Rondale Moore. They especially need someone in the slot. So Tyler Boyd being mocked there or reported there is definitely an interesting landing spot for him, as well as the Ravens. You know, with Odell Beckham gone, with Rashad Bateman never really doing anything, all you've really got right now is the oft-injured Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers, who of course is really good. So I do think Tyler Boyd would also fit there. And also, again, like the Steelers, staying in the AFC North, it does happen a lot with free agency where these teams have watched a player 2 times a year beat them up and then go out and sign them. So I think the Steelers and Ravens makes a lot of sense in that regard. But either way, I do think Tyler Boyd is someone that you should be trying to get before he signs somewhere, because as always, he's just going to be someone that you can start in a pinch if you need to. And I think all of those offenses that he's tied to right now, he would be pretty good for fantasy, at least in a pinch, at least in these deeper formats. So that's the Tyler Boyd information. Let's see. The next one is Hunter Renfrow, another slot receiver. And he's tied to a lot less teams. And it's honestly just crazy to me. Hunter Renfrow was like the wide receiver 11 2-3 years ago, on fire, killing it in route running. Derwin James even came out and said he was one of the best route runners in the league. And then he's done nothing since. You know, partly you could say it was Josh McDaniels and then having no quarterback, but also, and Devontae Adams coming in, taking away a lot of targets. But also Hunter Renfrow just clearly hasn't been playing to the same level he was his breakout season. And I don't know if a new team change is what he needs or what, but either way, he's going to go somewhere else. And I'm not sure how excited to get. But if he goes somewhere good, I mean, I'm going to get excited about it. I like slot guys that can command targets. And when you hear a player like Derwin James call him the best route runner in the league, I think you've got to listen, because Derwin James knows what he's talking about. And that was his enemy, right? So either way, it's looking like right now Hunter Renfrow is tied to the Cowboys and the Panthers. But of course, really all the other teams I mentioned with Tyler Boyd are probably in the market for Hunter Renfrow as well. The Cowboys and Panthers are just the 2 big ones. And if I had to pick, I'm going to go guess with the Panthers. Now, I know they just got Deontay Johnson. I know they have Adam Thielen. But I think Hunter Renfrow would also fit really well in that offense. And he has the Carolina ties, of course, playing for Clemson for so long. I think that him kind of going home as close as possible makes a lot of sense, and they do still need the wide receiver help. And with Adam Thielen getting up there in age, you kind of have someone like Hunter Renfrow who could replace Thielen over time, even if Hunter Renfrow is also kind of old for a wide receiver too. He came in so late. But still, I like the Panthers landing spot, and I like the Cowboys landing spot for him a lot as well. They could use a slot receiver now. They're moving on from Michael Gallup, and it's really still just CeeDee Lamb there. So I think the Cowboys would be a great fit for Hunter Renfrow. I think both of them would be good. And like Tyler Boyd, I would say if you can get Hunter Renfrow off your waiver wire, pick him up and see what happens. I think that this could be a fun one. And again, he was a really, really good wide receiver for fantasy just a few seasons ago. If you could get him really cheap and or free, I think with the right landing spot, we could see at least a little bit of a resurgence from Mr. Hunter Renfrow. which moves us to J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins right now actually has some odds out. So for Hunter Renfrow and Tyler Boyd, I couldn't find any odds, just some teams that they were meeting with and discussing with. For J.K. Dobbins, we actually have some odds. He is right now favorited to go to the Cowboys at plus 550. But then the Jets, the Chargers, and the Raiders are also in the mix. The Cowboys, of course, being the favorite right now, as they still haven't really made a splash signing for running back yet. And I do think J.K. Dobbins would be a good one. J.K. Dobbins, of course, outside of the injuries, is an explosive, very talented running back. He just keeps getting hurt. And so I'm still going to take a chance on J.K. Dobbins while I can. This is the last chance. This is the last stop for J.K. Dobbins. He's going to get one more year. If he gets hurt again, if he doesn't do well, you can cut bait. But I think with J.K. Dobbins, this is an opportunity to kind of crash and burn maybe, which, sounds bad. But it's an okay method at the running back market. Like, you can go get J.K. Dobbins for essentially free right now, really, really cheap, maybe as a throw-in piece, and just see what happens. And if he sucks, then you can just drop him. If he gets hurt, you can just drop him. It's probably over. But I would like to see what happens with him. One more team, one more shot, and hopefully he can stay healthy. The Cowboys would be a really good one. The Chargers is the one I'm going to pick the most out of these right now, the plus 1,000 for the Chargers. But I think, of course, his ties with Greg Roman and just Gus Edwards also makes me believe that the Chargers would be a very fun one for them. They could draft a running back, but why not also just take in J.K. Dobbins and pair him with Gus Edwards again? I think that would be funny, and I think it makes sense for a team that's clearly trying to rebuild all around the ball. Maybe don't get a franchise running back, but get an interesting duo in Gus the Bus and J.K. Dobbins, basically bringing the Ravens backfield to Los Angeles. The other one would be the Jets and the Raiders. On the Raiders, he would just kind of fit in every once in a while along with Samir White. And on the Jets, I think that would basically just kill Israel Abanikanda maybe, but I don't think he would get any true volume really. It would just still be Breece Hall's backfield. J.K. Dobbins isn't that type of running back. But the Cowboys and Chargers, both interesting teams to keep your eye on. The Chargers is one I would like to happen. I think that would be very, very fun and easy to pull off too, pretty cheap. FF Bearded Prince asks a great question. Do we sell as soon as Dobbins signs? If it's before the draft, probably. If it's after the draft and we like the landing spot, hold on. But yeah, if he signs somewhere before the draft, I would probably go ahead and sell, especially if it is a situation like the Chargers where you could make the argument that he'll be the starter. But I wouldn't want to take the risk because I do think that whatever team signs J.K. Dobbins will also probably draft a running back. And that is a risk I'm not sure I want to take. This is a pretty deep running back class. And so it is possible it's someone that is pretty good. And then with the injury history and everything, that's a few things. But if it's, if he gets signed after the draft because someone didn't get to draft the running back they wanted and they actually want to take the chance on J.K. Dobbins, you just hold and see what happens because it's okay to lose an asset. It really is, especially one like J.K. Dobbins where it's not that much value anyway. But if you could, flip him for a third or something, I would probably do it if he signs somewhere and you can do that. The next player is Odell Beckham. Odell Beckham Jr. right now is actually visiting with the Miami Dolphins today, but is also tied to a few other teams. Right now, favorited to go to the Patriots or the Chargers at plus 500, but the Panthers, Packers, and Bills are also mixed in. And I'm going to pick the Bills out of this. I think that he will probably go to a contender, and the Bills could use another wide receiver after moving on from Gabe Davis with the uncertainty with Stephon Diggs, who I think is still going to be back in Buffalo. But you could use another option, and Odell Beckham is going to be a cheap option at his age, especially not producing really much last season for the Ravens. I think the Bills could get Odell pretty cheap, and I think he would be pretty fine. I really do. But the Patriots and Chargers make sense as well. The Patriots less sense. I'm honestly not sure why they're favorited. I know they've been making a lot of moves and bringing in these wide receivers, but I don't think they will get Odell. I think that it just doesn't make a lot of sense to get an older guy like that. I mean, maybe if they do draft a Jaden Daniels, they could sign Odell after the draft, and that would make more sense. But right now, it doesn't. Right now, the Chargers make sense because they have no wide receivers. The Panthers, of course, too. I mean, that would make sense, right? I mean, they don't have a wide receiver like Odell on that team. Of course, he still has the health concerns, still didn't produce too much last year, and is still probably washed, as Scrap Iron FF says. But I think he could still catch a few passes and get around 500 yards, which would be helpful for a quarterback like Bryce Young or a team like the Buffalo Bills who just need a little extra. Not like a lot, but just a little extra. Which brings us to Michael Thomas, and I'm only going to mention one team here. I think Michael Thomas is reunited with Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos. They clearly need wide receiver help. I think Michael Thomas is a very quarterback-friendly wide receiver, even with the health concerns, even with barely playing last year. I still think he'd be fine. I think Sean Payton would use him well, and I think the Broncos would like to get Michael Thomas because he's cheap. I'm not even going to mention any other ones. I think that's the one that's going to happen. Michael Thomas to the Broncos. And bear with me here, just a few more. Ryan Tannehill, obviously not a lot to talk about here. The teams he's tied to, there's actual odds out there. Jets at plus 400, Raiders at plus 650, Giants at plus 1,000. And then again, I'm going to mention the Broncos. There are no odds there. He's not tied to the Broncos right now per any reports, but this is a team that could potentially use a quarterback. And I think Ryan Tannehill would actually fit in a Sean Payton system a little bit, not like great, but I think he could be fine there. Sean Payton would probably have to add a little bit more play action, but I think he could handle it, especially since he'd be really cheap. But I think I like the Raiders the most. I think no, because they just got Gardner Minshew. I honestly don't really like any of these for Ryan Tannehill. If the Giants didn't just bring in, who did they help me out, guys? Who did they bring into Drew Lock? If they didn't bring in Drew Lock, I think that the Giants would have been a good spot for Ryan Tannehill. I think him and Daniel Jones have a very similar skill set, so I think that could have been a good veteran presence for Daniel Jones. So, hey, maybe that can still happen. Maybe we could still see Ryan Tannehill go to the Giants. And Jets, I guess, could make sense too, as we just saw what happened with them not having a backup quarterback. But either way, those are the teams he's tied to. Not sure where he'll go, and I'm honestly surprised he's still hanging around because I do think he's a solid backup, and some teams could use him. Which then brings us to Ezekiel Elliott, who last year actually ended up being pretty good. We all thought he was washed, but then he ends the year with over 900 yards, gets a few touchdowns, and comes in admirably after Ramondre Stevenson got hurt. So clearly he still has something left in the tank if the situation is right. I still think the situation has to be right, and I don't think he's really going to be crazy relevant unless an injury happens, but he's tied to a lot of teams. Chiefs right now are the favorite at plus 450, but he's also tied to the Ravens at plus 550, the Browns at plus 700, the Jets, the Texans, the Saints, the Jaguars, and the Rams. And out of those, I like the Chiefs. I think that he would be fun on that team, just going to a competitor, and it's the favorite. And I don't think he would take really anything from Isaiah Pacheco, but would just be a good body in the room so they could have another running back. And then also the Texans, I think makes a lot of sense. I think that he could be a good complement to Joe Mixon. I think he's a little bit better than Dameon Pierce is, and I think that they'd be able to get him pretty cheap, and I think he would make an impact. And the Rams also is very interesting at plus 1,600. I think he'd be a really good backup on that offense to Kyren Williams. I think that'd be some good insurance for them. I know he's not the most efficient or effective running back anymore, but again, with the right situation, if things go his way, he produced last year. And I think the Rams would be a really good system for him. So those are my top three: Chiefs, Texans, Rams for Ezekiel Elliott. Which brings us to Michael Gallup. And we're getting nitty gritty, guys. We're getting deep in there. Michael Gallup right now is tied to the Chargers, Jaguars, and the Falcons. Falcons keep making moves. They could continue, and I don't hate it. Michael Gallup is actually from Atlanta. I think that that's a potential there. They could use one more guy, I think. And instead of having to get it in the draft, you could just go get Gallup and see what happens. I mean, there's still some potential there with him, but the Chargers and Jaguars also makes a lot of sense. He would fit both of those offenses, and I think both would be solid landing spots for him. Michael Gallup is a player that I would definitely flip after he signs. I know he's stuck on a lot of rosters right now. I don't think he'll ever be fantasy relevant, but I do think that his value will get enough of an uptick that you could probably flip him when he signs. And the rest of these, they don't really matter unless they sign somewhere great, but I just kind of wanted you to get get these names in your head, as they do have some potential still. Cordarrelle Patterson, I just can't quit Scordarrelle. Just, it's a bias thing. A free agent right now. Will be cool if he went back to Atlanta, but he could potentially return to Pittsburgh with Arthur Smith and just play third fiddle to Warren and Najee. He could go back to the Patriots, where he saw some success a few years ago, or maybe even back to the Vikings. I don't know. Not really tied to any teams. It's possible he even retires at his age. But I think since he broke out so late and was pretty much just a kick returner for so long, I still think he has some tread on the tire. I don't think he'll be fantasy relevant. I just like Scorderell. Paris Campbell is one as well. If he lands somewhere where he could be a deep shot again, he's never produced, right? So it's going to be tough, but it's there. If it's the right spot, we could see. Russell Gage, he'll be coming off an injury. And, we saw lots of production from Russell Gage before the injury. So I think that he's a very interesting name to keep track of, Russell Gage. If he's available in your league, I'd honestly pick him up. DJ Chark is another one. He just honestly keeps producing as well when asked. I think he could sign somewhere and be a complimentary wide receiver. Josh Reynolds is another one as well. I think he'll probably end up signing back in Detroit. I don't see why he wouldn't. So I would probably try to get Josh Reynolds while you can. Jared Goff loves him. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Marcus Valdes-Scantling. Not sure what'll happen with those guys, but some names to keep track of. Also, Mecole Hardman. Really, all three of those Chiefs, they could end up back in Kansas City, or a team could take a shot on them, but potential some uptick there. Not expecting much. I mean, these are some bad players. I recognize it. I just, they're there. They fit in the category. Might as well mention them. So, guys, that's all I've got for you in terms of news and some names to keep track of that are still hanging around, unsigned free agents. Let's go ahead and check into the chat, see if there are any questions from you guys. And I'm sure there are. What do I think about this trade? Bought Olave for the 107 and a 2025 second. I acquired that 107 by selling Njoku and Christian Kirk. So basically got Olave for Njoku, Kirk, and a 2025 second. I also had the 101 and 106. I wouldn't have added that second. I would have tried just the 107, assuming this is super flex. If this is super flex, if this is one QB, this is definitely a much better trade for you. In super flex, I'm going to be a little unsure because in super flex, that 107 could be Brock Bowers. That 107 could be Malik Neighbors. That 107 could be Roma Dunze. That 107 could be JJ McCarthy if he gets drafted to the right team. And so I think the 107 is a really slept on pick right now. And I would have probably waited till draft day to see what it was before moving on from it, especially with adding that second. But that being said, you do still get a stud, an alpha wide receiver that you're very, very happy about on your roster. And for that, you can't complain. I just think you might have overpaid a little bit, just a little bit. But I'm also not the biggest. I'm not the biggest Olave guy. I'm really not. I think that he's going to be fine. I just feel like we should have seen something from him by now, at least to warrant his top 10 dynasty value or top 12 or whatever. I think he's a perfect wide receiver right now to tier down with. I think you could take Olave and get another wide receiver with a really good cherry on top and get very similar, if not better, production next year. Is Xavier Gibson a drop now that Mike Williams signed with the Jets? Yeah. Is Chigakonkwo a drop? No. Definitely hold on to him. The tight end position was used a lot in Callahan's Bengals offense. I'm sure Chig will be used a lot with the Bengals too. And we joked about it. Fantasy Intervention, who I saw in the chat, we joked about it a few episodes ago. Chig could be the power running back. I know it's mostly a joke, but it's possible too. Chigakonkwo was actually used as a running back in college, doing lots of end arounds and stuff. And they don't really have a power running back with Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears there too. So it's possible Chig kind of gets used as a quasi fullback almost just to get that short yardage stuff. So I would hold on to him and just see what happens because he still has that athleticism, right? So yeah, hold on to him. Anyway, that is everything now. All the questions have been answered. Actually, thoughts on Antonio Gibson on the Patriots? See that over here on Instagram. Not quite sure yet, to be completely honest with you. I feel like Antonio Gibson is just this player that we always get so hyped up over, and then he just never does anything. And I don't think the Patriots offense is one that's going to change that. He might get some volume, right? And I'm sure with Jaden Daniels or Drake May, they'll probably utilize the running backs. But I still think he's going to be more of a gadgety player, more and less consistency, probably not someone you can truly rely on. But I would say his value is probably going to maintain about the same. I doubt it goes down. And I would also say that there's some potential that the value goes up over the course of the off season, especially, but maybe even in season with an injury. So I think you've got to hold on to him, but I don't feel great about it. If there's someone in your league who would trade you a third for him, I would take a third for Antonio Gibson because I do think that you can get a really good rookie with that pick with much more potential. So anyway, that is everything I have for you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. This was another fun episode of Wake and Take. You guys were a great audience. yet again. I hope to see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern on the Player Profiler, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Don't forget to hit the like button on the way out. Don't forget to subscribe to Player Profiler. And don't forget to have a totally tubular Thursday and a wonderful rest of your week. Peace.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.